sauti huru kwa uadilifu na haki. Sisi tuko imara, Kenya mpya kwa matumaini ya dhati kutoka kaskazini.
Greetings everybody and welcome to Darubini ya Uchaguzi, otherwise known as Spotlight on Elections, a podcast hosted by the East and Horn of Africa Election Observers Network. I am pleased to have an esteemed panel with me that will be discussing strengthening election integrity, challenges, opportunities in East African election. But before we get into this discussion, I will provide a brief opportunity to all my panelists to introduce themselves and highlight their experience in election observation and democracy work in about a minute. So I will start my screen, right? Please introduce yourself.
Sarah Birete, I'm the current chair of the East and Horn of Africa Election Observers Network, EHON, as well as the chairperson for the Global Network for Domestic Election Monitors, GENDEM. I have observed the elections at national level in Uganda, regional level, and the Africa level, and I also work in elections beyond Africa. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. My name is David Michael Oden. I head the political affairs of the East African community based in Arusha Secretariat. I also coordinate the Forum of Electoral Commissions of African states. I also, in the same vein, I coordinate the observer missions for East African community whenever there's election. Thank you.
Sure.
My name is Vera Andrew. I work as a programs officer for civic Ghana elections accountability of law. I'm also the project coordinator for DEO, which is the Coalition of Domestic Consultants, which has been existing for 5 years.
My name is Baidesu Sikolge. I'm the executive director of the Electoral Institute for Sustainable Democracy in Africa. I have extensive experience in election observation, both at local and continental level. And I'm involved in providing technical support to continental and sub-regional entities and citizen groups in election observation. Thank you.
Ringai Chifundevava is my name, from Zimbabwe. I'm the executive director for the Zimbabwe Election Support Network, the host director for the Election Support Network of Southern Africa. I'm also a board member for the Global Network of Domestic Observers, and I'm an electoral expert with over 25 years of experience and have observed extensively elections in the region.
Thank you all. And I am your host, Andrew Songa, Regional Advisor on African Union Engagement, European Partnership for Democracy, but then also being from Kenya, I have some wealth of experience engaging within localized networks, election. So you can see you have a wealth of experience around me, covering not just East Africa, but also other regions, West and Southern Africa, as well as continental experience. And it is indeed very deep experience, spanning decades in some respects. I do feel quite humbled and privileged to be able to have this conversation. So to start us off, I think I will start with a more broad-based question that I want you all to engage with. 2024 was dubbed the super year of election, not just continentally, but globally. And so we've seen a lot of trends, a lot of things that happened in relation to electoral experience citizens all over the world. I guess my preliminary question would be this. Based on the engagement we've had, the elections we've observed, what would you say are the biggest trends shaping electoral process in Africa today? I'll start again.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I did participate in a study mission for EHON in Ghana elections, but I also followed closely on Senegal and Namibia elections. So drawing from the 3 examples that were positive, I would like to share a few opportunities and later challenges for elections and electoral integrity in Africa. So if you take the example of Senegal, Senegal had the vagueness on the dates for elections after a failure by the incumbent to extend his tenure in office. And it had to take the constitutional court, to set a deadline for elections and the handover of power, showing a weakness in the electoral calendar of the country, but also a challenge of how political interests can override the national laws of a nation, but the importance of courts as safeguards for democracy, as gatekeepers for electoral integrity and the power of the people. So Senegal was able to transit peacefully thanks to the court's intervention after so many struggles, including taking to the streets. The case of Namibia had a seemingly smooth election generally, with the technical challenges, but a peaceful and very smooth handover of power. And Ghana, on the other hand, had a very smooth election, a little bit of turbulence after election, but a very smooth handover of power, with both parties, the ruling party conceding defeat, congratulating the winners, one day even before the Electoral Commission made formal announcements. So we had that opportunity of transparent pre-election and election systems. Parties are allowed to freely tabulate and announce their results, because the elections were called by the opposition party. And just in a space of 30 minutes, the ruling party also called a press conference conceding. We did not wait for the Electoral Commission to announce. So that transparent process was really a success story and a beacon of hope for Africa. On the other hand, we had challenges in Mozambique, where there was no respect for the will of the people, political interference, and other issues. But the three examples give hope that indeed democracy is possible in Africa.
Thoughts? I have the feeling that it's a trend towards enhancing legitimacy. The voters or citizens, on one hand, trying to anchor themselves as the determinants of legitimacy of government. By that, they are waking up into registering and going to vote, and in attempts to influence the outcome of election. On the other hand, political parties are working hard also to exert their legitimacy as the rightful government or team of leaders take over the governance of the country. Last year, 2024, I participated in a number of elections, but 2 or 3 in Africa. We started off in South Africa. I was one of the observers in South Africa, where it was very clear that citizens' agency in shaping the future of electoral democracy was very clear. Having the predominant ruling party could not win majority vote in parliament was saying about the citizens' agency into active participation in the political process, especially election. The government, the new government, was not able to be formed by one party because there was no one outright party that win majority in parliament. So there was a coalition of a number of parties to form a government. That in itself is a clear sign that election and election democracy can work in Africa, and therefore citizens can have their say on the candidates and political parties that present themselves for election. I observed another election in Rwanda in July 2024, and one clear thing that came out of the election of Rwanda is the ease and simplicity of the electoral system that allows voters to, without any disenfranchisement, participate in the election. The system is such a hybrid of one past the post, but also kind of parliamentary and presidential system of election, where you have political parties presenting themselves and their candidates, but also independents present themselves. But they also have to present party lists. And the party list, and then the one other unique thing is that the constituency of a member of parliament is national. At the time of election, you don't know where you are going to be a member of parliament until you convene after the elections in the parliament, then you distribute the constituency. It makes election very violence-free, very easy, and very actively participating for every stakeholder. And indeed, elections are very smooth. And the processing of electoral results also takes faster. That doesn't delay, like in many places, 2 or 3 days before you can get the final results. There it is very easy. So, by and large, a number of participants, the election, both as voters and other interactors in the process, so that people have strong agency for active participation and influence outcome election. This should be a very good example of, or a good hope that electoral democracy can work, but also engaging citizens and many stakeholders promotes effectively democracy.
So, going into 2024 elections, Ghana was under a lot of pressure. Let me speak to the Ghana experience. Knowing what is happening in the sub-region, region which experienced a lot of coup d'etat. You could sense every other democracy looking up to Ghana and us making sure that we get it right. And so there was so much tension. We had had a convention of every 8 years, we have a change of government. But going into 2024 election, the ruling government says they had a slogan, we are breaking the 8, meaning that it will be the first time a certain government is going to win past the 80 years rule. And then the opposition, which was also keen to come to power after 8 years in being opposition, had major issues, trust levels in the EMBs, in the courts. And so they had said they were not going to court. And so that was how tense the situations were. We have seen instances where the parties say, okay, we'll settle in court. But now they say we are not going to court because we don't trust the court system. Meaning that they were going to do everything in their power to win the process and not look at any ways of mediation. So it was a tense moment and it was a tense case for Ghana, knowing that we had over 3 getting to 4 successive handing over of power. That was how much the world was looking up to us, and then the sub-region also looking up to us to make sure we get it right. That was a time that civil society decided that we needed to observe the process closely and not just wait for the election days. So started from all the pre-election activity. How do we ensure that even with the voters register is credible? How do we monitor the process and engage the Electoral Commission, the campaign process? And so our media engagement this time, we had to intensify the way we engage the media. So we even had to find a way to bring the media to train them on media reporting, because we realized that the issue about misinformation, disinformation, and misinformation, really, the media plays a key role. And if you look at the trend in Ghana, media, how Ghanaians absorb information, about 90% from radio. That's how much information is. So we realize that we need to get the media to appreciate the electoral processes. Electoral integrity is not just only a day activity on election day. Election is a cycle. How do we ensure that the media appreciate the process and all the actors, the role they had to play So we started very early to say that we know you need to look at all the elections that has happened in other African countries and how do we learn from the process. We don't have to keep making the same mistakes. And so we decided to change some papers, have some policy brief meetings with the various stakeholders, the EMBs. So they also realized how much pressure they were facing, knowing that the world was looking up to them and everybody wants to see what Ghana does because it influences a lot in fabric. And so electoral integrity, we were put to test, I would say, and then we tried our best. But from the processes getting to the election day was smooth. The setup, look at the reports we saw. We had our observers on the field from the setup, the voting process. We saw a very smooth transition. The point where we had an issue was the post-election, the collation center. So the Ghana system works such that members of parliament, we have the same election whilst we're having a presidential election. Members of parliament elections are declared at the college constituency level. And so it's just first past the post. So we had seen members of parliament win with just 1, 2, 3 votes. So when the votes are closed, then it happens with a lot of chaos. So it happened. It was
I
quite
think I want to stop you right there
Okay.
because I will take a deeper dive
Okay.
on the Ghana example
Okay.
and what it means for reform
Right.
slightly later. But I think very insightful lessons I can already pick from the last Ghana election. But so I've seen so far on my right a sense of optimism and hope and belief in Africa's democratic journey. What I think I'm hearing from the three of you so far. I think an emphasis on what citizen vigilance and enthusiasm for democracy can do for our democracy systems, that it's because citizens are supposed to remain vigilant, that they turned the tides, maybe some situations where electoral integrity would have been undermined, but then also enthusiasm that because citizens want to engage and exercise their belief in the voting, that then that in itself enforces the importance of election integrity, but then also the importance of institutions. I think what has come up quite a bit on this side of the discussion, and how the courts should then be expected to rise to the occasion if and when some of these political actors in fact try to subvert electoral integrity. So I wonder whether we will keep the streak of enthusiasm, optimism going this side of the table as you pick the trends in 2020.
You. To add to what has been already said, yes, the SAPA 2024 year has shown some good lesson we can draw on the peaceful conduct of the election in most of the country, and particularly in countries like South Africa, Botswana, where we have seen even some alternation to power. Botswana, Senegal, Mauritius. And the other lesson is that everywhere we have seen that young people are mobilized, there has been always a change. Mauritius, they were mobilized and then they could remove the ruling party. In Senegal, it was because of youth mobilization. We saved this democracy. Otherwise, the country could have joined the other like Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. And but there is some point of concern, the political disaffection, mainly from young people, because they are no longer seeing democracy or election as the main mechanism to solve political conflict. I think for young people, election is no longer playing this role, and it becomes a problem. And the lack also of political renewal. When you accept election like in Senegal, Ghana, Mauritius, and in Botswana, it is the same political party who has been in power since the independence to continue dominating the political scene. And this means there is still a lot to do in terms of engaging young people in terms of renewing the political landscape. So yeah, we are optimistic, but we still have a lot to do.
Quite a bit of work to do. Linda.
Okay. My colleagues have said a lot of issues. which I wanted to talk about. As you know, in Southern Africa, we had many elections last year. So we realized also the role of the youth, the growing influence of young people, as they comprise over 60% of the population. They are demanding for more accountability, more transparency, participation in governance processes. So we saw that role of the youth in terms of elections. Then the other issue we also noted was the presence of observers and the influence of observers. All these elections in our region were observed by organizations like the African Union. It was all over. We also noted observer missions like Commonwealth, the regional observer organizations like the Election Support Network for Southern Africa, ASA, my brother seated close by. So there was consistency in terms of observation and also in terms of the methodology. And when you look at the reports, they were consistent in terms of messaging. And there is more coordination among the observer missions in terms of what was observed and generally the recommendations. Then the other issue we noted was also the use of digital media, particularly the presence of young people on social media, and then the social media also becoming the voice for the voiceless, that you see campaigns all over in terms of messaging platforms for empowering political expression, for political participation. So the role of the media was very eminent. And lastly, I would also want to say, we saw the use of technology in these elections. In South Africa, the voting machines. Then also we saw the results management systems being embraced in the region. However, on the downside of it, I think there is still apathy in terms of the elections. We noted that the numbers are getting lower. There is lack of interest among some groups in terms of participation. Then the other issue is the rise of political violence. The Mozambique elections is a case in point, but generally also in some countries we saw intolerance. The level of intolerance among political parties is rising. So there is need, I think, for us to focus also on preventing electoral violence vis-a-vis election observation, so that at least there is work before, during, and after, focusing on how we can also prevent electoral violence.
Thank you very much. I think so. We have a very fully fledged perspective. I think that is built in terms of the promise and perils of our democracy seen through the window of the elections that we are conducting. But there's much we can consolidate and build on if we then manage to address some of the challenges that I think I've had come out so eloquently, especially with regards to making sure that there are democratic dividends to elections that are things to what you mentioned about the disillusion, what has capitalized on and said has reflected in terms of the developments in some of this election. But how do we get there? How do we consolidate these gains? I think we need to turn our gaze some of the critical actors around election. And obviously, one of the most critical actors are our electoral management bodies, the electoral commissions that are trusted to preside over and administer elections. And I just want to get your initial thoughts and perspectives based on experiences on the kind of role our electoral commissions have played in regards to the question of election integrity. Are they on the path to safeguarding election integrity? Are they themselves a challenge to election integrity? And basically, where do they stand in terms of public trust? I'd just like to get a snapshot from your experiences of what you feel electoral commissions are doing around the continent when it comes to the question of electoral integrity. So again, I will start.
When it comes to the EMBs, if they are independent and properly constituted and resourced, they also need two other elements to safeguard electoral integrity. So they don't work in isolation. They need the rule of law in the country, and active citizenry that can hold the leaders accountable, that can amplify their voices. So you need the three elements to exist: independent institutions of governance, including the EMBs, rule of law, and active citizenry. So they don't work in isolation. In countries where we are celebrating the gains for electoral integrity, these are the common denominators. And in countries where democracy is backsliding, these are the gaps, including my own country, Uganda. These are the major gaps. The institutions do not know how to claim their authority and exercise their mandate. There is no or declining rule of law in the country. And then the element of a critical mass of active citizenry is lacking. These are countries where there is stagnation or democracy backsliding. In countries where we celebrate progress, like Ghana, like Namibia, South Africa, Senegal, these are the predominant elements that have propelled and protected democracy. Democracy does not work in isolation and does not propel itself. So when you have the rule of law is able to guarantee the civil and political rights, the freedom of political parties, the freedom of the media, the freedom of access to information, the freedom of people to, the protection of fundamental rights and freedoms, then you have democracy in the country. So you need all the three elements to work together, not just one of a strong and independent TMB.
I can't agree more with Sarah, but just to add that more and above the wider extent or infrastructure and the environment for the AEMBs to operate are also internal gap and internal capacity of the EMBs. Due to the fact that we have most of our countries on the continent, we have governance deficiency. We also have elements that in some countries they are independent EMBs. Some others can try to be independent, but as default because of the wider operating environment, not very as Sarah has mentioned. Within the EAC, for example, we can categorize our capacity of EMBs in three categories. There are those who are very resilient and have undergone a lot of experience and capacity building. And as Electoral Commission or EMBs, they are strong enough. Say, for example, in one or two cases where the outer environment not very conducive. We have another group which is medium. And then there's a third group that perhaps has never seen election at all, or has never organized election at all, but they are EMBs. And capacity also includes resources. Some are very badly resourced that in election they won't expect much coming out of the election and can compromise seriously the integrity of that election. But there are others who are strong enough within the very, very, very bad operating environment, they can deliver something. Because they have technical capacity, they have the infrastructure capacity, they have resources, only the software outside that be a challenge.
And to say that the independence of the EMB is core, is fundamental to the electoral integrity. And sometimes it's also the perception of the public, either if the EMB is indeed independent. And even though we saw how Ghana's Electoral Commission and is seen as a good example, look at the Afrobarometer data, you realize how the Electoral Commission's trust levels or the perception among the public keeps going down. We realize this also because of how the EMBs communicate. The communication was very key. You see members of the commission speaking to the media, and then we had to witness is the communication person for the EMB. It has to be treated very professionally. You can't just have anybody speaking. You may have the technical words for it, but you need to find a way to communicate to the public, to understand and appreciate what you have. Because the political parties have interest. Political parties have a way of communicating. They have followers, and sometimes they just want to come out and say things just for their followers to know what is happening. But when the Electoral Commission realized that they need allies, they need civil society, they need observer groups. And so constantly at their meetings, they wanted the EMB, the CSOs and observer groups to be around, such that when the political parties speak, we have observer group also speaking. Quickly to add that we had instances where we are able to participate in the party advisory committee in Ghana as a civil society or citizen observer group. After the meeting, sometimes you hear political parties issue statements and press release, and you are wondering if it was the same meeting you were all in. And so we had to find a way to also communicate for the public to know that you can continuously, as political party, push information out there which is false, which will incite the public against the EMB. So that was important role that EMBs have to know that civil citizens groups are not fighting against them. We are working to complement the work that they do. So their communication needs to be very much transparent.
Thank you. Very important aspect. Be open, be transparent, communicate in a timely way, in an effective way, in a responsive way, and not afraid of target criticism. I think those are very important issues to focus on for our electorate. Over to you.
Thank you. The issue of independence of electoral and unfortunately are not time that can enhance self-trust. So far, most of them, maybe because they are put in place, act like governmental branch and not an independent body that works for citizen democratic process in country. But we have seen that in some country where the electoral open, organization for the Palestinians, the conduct of this, and there the case of Liberia, where the electoral open holding press conference every week or even every day when compiling facing the question, the concern, and it end up reinforcing the trust confidence and in the process itself. But we must also notice something. Our electoral commission are evolving in a political context, political environment, which more and more close. This is being closed by the ruling party, by the government, and this also affects independence of the electoral commission. When you look in this sub-region, the East African region, to meet with the electoral commission, need to pass to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. If not, no appointment could be granted. So how can you defend your independence if you are not even open to meet with external actors without the approval of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs? So there is
some barriers.
Okay, I would say the issue of impartiality of the electoral commissions remains an issue of concern for most countries, and this is a challenge for public confidence and trust in elections. So we realize that there is a deficiency in terms of trust among citizens to most electoral management bodies in Africa. There are three types of election management bodies. The governmental model, which is situated within the government ministries like Home Affairs, local government. Then there is the independent electoral commissions, which has become so fashionable when you look at the majority of those there in Africa. When we changed our constitutions, we call them independent. When we look on the ground, they are just there on paper as independent. but they don't operate independently. Then the third model is the mixed model, which has got the commission, but there are still functions run by the government, like in some countries, voter registration. He mentioned the role of the Minister of Foreign Affairs when it comes to the role of electoral commissions, the role of ministries of finance when it comes to funding. So that then brings executive interference, that it's independent on paper, but in practice, it's not operating as independent. So I think what needs to be done is to look into the legal framework to ensure that the appointments are done publicly, to make sure that there is no cherry picking of loyalists for the ruling parties. Then secondly, they need to be well resourced by having consolidated funding so that they don't beg for money from the government. They need to have money throughout the electoral cycle. Then thirdly, the tenure, like it in Ghana, you don't come in for one term of office, 5 years, 10 years. It's for life, like what judges do. That way, you don't look over your shoulder in terms of whether I'll get the next renewal once my office expires. It also affects the impartiality, then integrity of the elections. Then also even the issue of reporting. We realize that most countries, they report to the ministers who are also candidates when it comes to elections. Rather, I think they should be reported to a particular committee in parliament so that at least there is some kind of independence. So I think those are some of the electoral reforms which needs to be tightened to make sure that our electoral commissions are independent, which in turn, they would also result in enhancing electoral integrity rather than having executive interference affecting the role of electoral commissions. Ultimately, then it affects electoral integrity.
Very interesting recommendations with regards to oversight and tenure security for electoral management bodies. That I think.
One more thing.
Yes.
In many of the emerging democracies, also to say in Africa, appointment to the electoral commission is a reward from the executive. So that already compromises constituting that commission. Already compromised because they are seen as a reward or some political reward.
So driving towards merit-based appointments as opposed to political appointments. But now, having done that landscape continentally, I want us to now hone in on a particular region. After all, this is Darubini ya Uchaguzi, which means spotlight. We want to put the spotlight on East Africa. And so the hot seat will go to the two, so to speak. I want us to reflect. We know we have some big elections coming up in this side of the world. You know, we are talking Tanzania, Uganda, Burundi, and I want us to reflect. And then I'll want the rest of the panelists who have already done it, have experienced countries that have done it, to reflect on what you will hear from East Africa, maybe share some insight that can help us think through the road we're about. So I want us to focus on election preparedness in the East African region. And so I would want some perspective based on the elections that are coming up. Dr. Sarah, what potential minefields are we looking at? Political and legal challenges are we seeing in this upcoming election? And do you think we're prepared based on?
Well, I know we have 3 upcoming elections: Burundi, Tanzania, Uganda. The civic space in these countries is both, defined, is all defined as regressed by the Civicus Monitor for 2024 that was released in November by Civicus Africa. And you'll find that there are challenges of civil and political rights. Burundi being a post-conflict country that is still struggling to reconcile. There are challenges with some of the actors still living outside Burundi, including civil and political actors. Some of them have not yet returned home. There are challenges with the quality of elections as a recovering country, but they've been able to transit politically with term limits in the constitution, although the previous president died in office during the COVID time, but the country has been able to transit, and there are signs for progress with some challenges. Tanzania, on the other hand, has been on a trajectory of democracy decline. From the time of President Kikwete, although they have maintained one party in power since independence, the Chama cha Mapinduzi, the rights of the opposition, the respect for political dissent, the terrain, keeps closing. If you look at the nature of civic elections they held in October, November last year, 2024, where the ruling party got 99.1% after 70% cancellation of opposition candidates with no justification, with no redress, those elections had nothing to write home about. If that terrain is maintained, then you will have a situation where the opposition, the main opposition party, Chadema, and the Act Wazalendo have been pushing for constitutional reforms ahead of elections, the reforms that have not happened. And there has been a consistent, rising violence on the island, Zanzibar, which usually holds its own. The ruling party, puts violence on the island to maintain, a majority. So Tanzania also, it's a turbulent zone. Uganda, on the other hand, could be the worst turbulent zone of the three, with the incumbent that has been in power for 4 decades and is still going strong. So after 40 years, President Museveni will be seeking re-election. And usually there is a high violence. If we were to use the recent by-election in Uganda as a precursor for the general elections, for the first time, we had a situation where the war fighter vehicles known as Mamba, drove into a polling station with over 100 guns and so many soldiers, scaring away everybody. So if we are to use that as a yardstick, then and the harassment of journalists, with more than 20 journalists that were hospitalized in a single constituency by election after violence by the military, then anybody who wants to engage in Uganda elections has to look for bulletproof gear. Yeah, that's what I can say.
So now I will turn to David after that very sobering reflection from Dr. Sarah, and now ask, are our elections becoming a question of peace and security?
Elections in Africa and many developing countries is a matter of peace and security, as you just said. Because you remember I one time said that the parameters of electoral integrity, as it progress or regress with the time, the initial definition of an election is that it was free and fair. Then eventually it turned to free, fair, and peaceful. I think now from peaceful they're adding another parameter calling it. But that tells you now that the lenses for looking at electoral integrity also expanding. And the fact that they've added peaceful as one of the parameters means there's potential violence. They have seen post-election violence in many places in Africa. And within the peace and security architecture and the governance architecture of Africa, for example, election is a trigger to many other embedded outstanding or structural issues that already have existed before. So mismanaged election become a trigger for violence and instability. And that's why the parameter peaceful comes in, so that it is intentional for the stakeholders in the election that they look at the aspect of that election. Without that, all the rest has gone to the drain. Whether there was free and fair, or whether it is there or not, but when it is violent, it has gone to the drain.
I have to have a quick follow-up on that particular issue. You've spoken about structural issues that underlie our elections, and so you have to be alive to them before you talk about electoral integrity. My question to you, Kam, how is the East African community looking at this structure, even as we look towards observing this election? Does the EAC frame of electoral observation contemplate and think about some of these underlying structural issues that underpin electoral?
Indeed, EAC alive the history, different history of the members that formed it. Whether it be Burundi, whether it be Tanzania, Uganda, or Kenya, whatever. All these have different histories, democracy, governance. So they are alive that, and when we go into observing election, we have that lens when that where is this country coming from? In evaluating or assessing the success or non-success, the electoral processes, and perhaps the integrity process. A lot has evolved, positive and sometimes aggressive, of course. But let's look at, for example, Burundi in 2015. In 2015, it was turbulent. Actually, there was no election because even the EAC then decided there cannot be election under this circumstance. Of course, they went ahead and organized the election, but the result is what we saw later. But in 2020, there was a transition. Of course, under pressure, but there was a transition from one leader to another. And we are seeing that progression, but they still suffer consequences of 2015 till now. And that also undermines the quality of the election because it limits the capacity of the EMB or TSENI to organize the best election they can do. Resource-wise, they're limited, capacity, they're limited, and so forth. And that also explains why somebody can question the quality and the integrity of the election. But they strive at least to hold a regular election, but also that election which can change and can result into a peaceful transition. The former head of state tried to change the constitution.
So, Parliament refused it. Used the peace agreement to keep it out. But they did.
The constitution has been changed to give the presidency 7 years from 5. That's why this year will not see presidential election in Burundi come in 2027. That's one change. So what is going to happen now in May is election of Senate and Parliament. Then June, they will be elected the local government. And now president will be 2027. That was changed by the former regime. Perhaps hoping to. So that's one. We have seen that change also in Rwanda often, from 5 to 7, then back to 5, then back to 7. We just had election, as I said earlier, Rwanda. One of the things that has changed in terms of building capacity of the EMB and also some improvement in this independence is to give it a full-time data. Rwanda had also the ad hoc commission, which is appointed close to election, then disbanded when election. But now the commission is full-time. So that is an improvement. We still need to have that in Tanzania. Tanzania also has, I think, 3 commissioners. I think chair of the commission is permanent, but the rest come and go. And some of the staffing, technical staffing, is sourced from department and ministry of government. Those are some of the elements that give the gray area for the public trust, mission, and outcome of the elections. Uganda is going to be on a serious spotlight given the science that is already there. By the way, as we sit in EAC, part of our conflict early warning system always tells us that there are issues coming up in this area. So part of the means of ways of countering is prepare early and start the talking early. Now, for example, engagement very formally started with stakeholders in Uganda because really there are bad signs. And that was confirmed by the recent by-election. The signs are not good for free and fair and peaceful election. So stakeholders have to work towards that. They have done that one before, including Kenya here in 2022. Our intervention de-escalated to a greater extent the potential for violence during and after, because we had early intervention signs that were coming. So by and large, the three elections that are coming may not meet the national threshold that as we know them, but at least what we see is a peaceful transition, political transition from one regime to another. In some cases, the regime may be the same, but at least there's a peaceful transition. That is more important. We can keep on improving on the rest of the things.
I now have to project, because now we have moved from optimism to very dark clouds about the future. And I think this is the crux of what we need to start to be. And so if you hear that kind of forecast, the immediate question that pops to mind, I'm seated on a panel with citizen observer people on election. How do you navigate this? How are you going to be able to intervene in a space with that kind of forecast? Hey, you're going to observe that election, going to advocate for electoral integrity, and are going to put our voices heard regards to making sure that the process of elections don't become a themselves, but in fact deliver what you highlighted earlier in your initial remarks as what I would summarize to. So I have your experience coordinating citizen observer. Some of you, I believe, in similar forecast context, but I just want your reflection. This is what stuff is looking at. How should Dr. Zaren approach the process of observing election and intervening for the prospects of tough questions?
Listening, ambition. Sometimes we take for granted what we have in our country. And it also tells us that we need to know more about what is happening on the continent. Because whatever happens, other countries will have either directly or indirectly effect on us as well. And there are times you are tempted to be content with what you have, that, oh, okay, as for Ghana, we are okay. But we've also seen what's happened around us, our neighbors. They need to increase that solidarity and to ensure that more and more we are getting interested. It was until after our election, we had a mission from Tanzania. The Catholic Church came study what Cordero Ghana is in with our election observation. And that was when I was exposed more to what is happening in other parts of it. Because we know Kenya is a good example for us, using your electronic transmission and other things to look at, okay, how best do we do? Until you hear from other, how come I've heard so much about the Tanzania example until we had that conversation. And so we're thinking, how do we ensure that we go beyond even the region, the sub-region, and to look at the continent as a whole, and the best examples that we've done, how other groups also look at the model. So for instance, in Ghana, we have, what we do is coalition. So we have the domestic election observer. It's not just one organization. We have about 42 member organization. And so we have the Christian group, the Muslim, we have professional group, the teachers, the nursing groups, women's group. So when we continue to observe and issue our report, it's not coming from just TDD or CDD, which I am a member of the organization. It's the network. And so you don't have them attacking just an individual. When it's just a group observing and issuing reports, sometimes it's easy for you to be attacked. But imagine having a whole Ghana National Teachers Association or Nurses Association, the professional groups. Then they all come in, then there's a channel of communication, there's structure. And then also for the methodology, we put it out there. So it maybe just one of the things is to see how these countries could adopt the coalition or the network in terms of observation. Because if you're an individual organization, it's easy to target and to track who is doing what and who are the leaders. But when they come and they see that, okay, the leaders are all scattered, we have all bodies in there, and with one person, they all can't be wrong at the same time because they know what they're doing. We have the professional accountant assistants with all the methods. And also for consistency, I don't think it will just be one day thing. Over time, because we have done this over time, you have the losing party coming against us. And then when they win, they use our report also to make a case. So gradually, when they realize that, okay, consistently, these observer group reports are inconsistent with the Electoral Commission, are inconsistent with the other international observer group, then they come to accept the observer group. So I think it won't just be a one-day thing, but to see how the various regional network laws could also support the country, citizens group, and the recruitment. I think what we do is that because we are a member organization, we recruit from our members, and we also recruit from the polling station. We recognize, even in a country like Ghana, we still recognize how observation could also be risky. So you don't just put people anywhere. You have to observe a polling station you are familiar with and you come from, so that people there know you. And so you don't bring someone there and say, who are you? Who is this person? Are you here to rig the election? We have had instances like that. So for our recruitment and our deployment, we are very deliberate about the people we assign to the polling station. You have to be from the polling. You have to know them. You have to know the language. Just that when something happens, the people can identify you and you know where to pass and how to run. Yeah.
Let's localize our resilient system. Let's build solidarity networks amongst each other. But then very importantly, what I had you begin with is let us also expand that solidarity to continental solidarity, so that the Pan-African notion around electoral integrity. We have a local politician who likes to say, we are Africans and Africa is our business. So let's make electoral integrity our collective business. And so if our East African partners, like Sarah, need continental solidarity to amplify electoral integrity, that it's not an East African affair, it's an African affair. Now, over to you. What advice, what thoughts? How do we navigate very tough terrain?
Okay, if we have to consider this backdrop outlined by our colleagues from the East African community, there are clear signs of possible violence during the upcoming election in Uganda, in Burundi, and in Tanzania. And I think one of the strategy that could be used is for our continental and sub-regional bodies to deploy pre-election assessment mission from now to assess the local context and maybe start putting in place a kind of preventive diplomacy strategy to engage with key actors to make sure that at least the conduct of the process be peaceful. And this pre-election assessment mission could also come out with key recommendation for a kind of interaction with other network working in some other countries where experts could be deployed to help other organizations in Uganda, in Tanzania, in Burundi. In Tanzania, it will be a bit difficult because the ruling party is in control of everything. And since what happened in Botswana, I think the fear now in Tanzania is for the ruling party to lose the control on the country. But there is something to be done. And once come also to the African Union, to the East African community and some other organization, the selection, the choice of those who will be appointed to lead the electoral commission, the election observation mission need to be done carefully so that they deploy people then can speak to others have this experience and not those who can just come to back the ruling party or the outgoing president?
For me, from the analysis given for the sake of ticking the box, that there are periodic elections. And from the analysis, it is already predetermined that these elections are not going to be meeting the credibility tests. So in my view, election observation should now come to a point where we need to reflect, even at the African Union level, the East African community, even as domestic observers, we need to invest in election observation when the situation is like that, or we need to explore other mechanisms and invest the resources towards maybe capacity building, electoral management bodies, electoral reforms, and also maybe preventing electoral violence, early warning systems, negotiation, mediation, preventing diplomacy, investing in other institutions like the panel of the wise, the elders, and also local traditional leaders, the churches, the youth and women, so that the focus is not just to wait and observe when the damage is already done. There is need for work to be done beforehand, well in advance, because the election day, it's already too late for us to go and observe. It might not change everything. The signals are very clear that we are likely to see electoral violence. We are likely to see also the role of the electoral commissions being compromised. We are likely to see also a number of challenges in the electoral process. So perhaps the work should begin now. Much work needs to be done now in terms of possible administrative electoral reforms to be put in place to avoid elections which are going to be sham.
Okay, thank you. We are well run on time, but I still want to engage this esteemed panel about two critical issues. I'll start with the first one, which pertains to something actually you had raised in some of your remarks, the aspect of technology, digital platforms, and what they mean for our election. So I just want to ask very quickly from your vantage points as observers, as people within the economic community, very briefly, how do you see technology working for you with regards to electoral observation? Are you going to embody it and incorporate it into your strategies, and how are you going to do that? And what challenge do you see being presented by technology, even as reset, as part of the strategy advancing action?
Well, technology is both an enabler, but also, if not used well, can bring about challenges for elections. So the known challenges for technology in elections is the misinformation and disinformation, fake news, deep fakes, as well as other challenges, of data mining and targeted advertising, or political advertising, which then creates unfair or unleveled ground for the actors. And given these challenges, then it's important that the use of technology in elections is properly regulated. If used well, they increase transparency in elections. They create, data, lasting data, through backed up, voter information data that is easily verifiable by the actors at the post-conflict level in case of contestation. But when countries use technology as they feel like, and I want to again use an example closer to me back in Uganda, where we don't have regulations governing the use of technology, even after a Supreme Court directive to enact the same. So the government is selectively using technology in elections, denying citizens an opportunity of backed up voter information for verification at a court level. And this takes away the big advantage of technology. So we need proper regulations governing technology to be able to increase transparency and accountability, hence the integrity of elections. But we also need the reality of fact-checking mechanism so that people don't take advantage using misinformation and disinformation, as well as, preventive measures for cyber, the cyber protection for the actors involved, especially women, who are the biggest victims of cyber harassment during elections. As observers, it benefits us in information gathering. It's quicker, it's reliable. When you use, technology to collect data for observation in the field, and it's easily verifiable and backed up, so it makes our work easier.
So, very important question around regulation. I know we have the Cybersecurity Convention that the African Union has passed. I know there's strategies around artificial intelligence that the EU is propagating. I guess my quick question to you, David, the ESC going to give its members direction around the regulation question, technology?
A number of the EMBs already use technology election process, which is a trend, because if you have to improve on accuracy of information, if you have to improve on speed of processing information, you have to improve on transparency and so forth, you need the technology. Technology will present, in our region, technology will present a challenge. First, that it relies on internet. First of all, the internet regulation, access and regulation of internet supply, that's a challenge, because the service providers are accountable to it. We have power, electricity. If you are supposed to engage technology at polling station, they still have the challenge of power supply to support technology at the polling station. But it's a good idea. Most AMBs are encouraged to go advance technology. And this also comes the backdrop of perhaps trust dividends in the EMBs, trying to address the challenges of trust using technology. And of course, at the end, the cost, technology itself, and the cost of acquiring, but the cost of maintenance and the cost of operating, increasing the budget for election. And under circumstances that many countries had them. We have seen best technology work in Tanzania, in Kenya. We have seen in DRC, by the DRC so far has the most advanced technology in electoral processing. If the environment allows them to do them well, that's the best from registration of voters, the declaration of results. Best technology. Second to what I saw elsewhere outside Africa and Latin America. If it's well powered at the polling station, if the users are well trained and have the capacity, it is the best thing to do. As we say, to speed up processing, to get more accuracy and also increase transparency. All these are ingredients for integrity.
So I will then pose the question on technology very quickly, with a very direct. Codeo, acting on past elections, then point one good example, innovation by Codeo in terms of technology. Starting.
Okay. So we recognize that Codeo deploy observers to the field. This 2024, you deploy about over 4,000 observers. But we recognize that a lot of things happen on the social media. And so what we did was that we partnered with another civil society organization, Pens Plus Byte, which has the tools and knowledge and capacity to check fake news, misinformation, and able to fact check as well. So on our situation room, during our observation, whilst our observers on the field physically, they were monitoring what's on social media, Twitter, Facebook, and all. So we had to find a way to do that triangulation, to find our observers on the field. What is happening? This is what we have seen on social media. What is happening there? They were able to use our observers on the field to counter some of the happening, and also to do some follow-ups, because we had some observers who were only roaming. So they needed to go to some of the places directly to observe. And we were able to counter a lot of some misinformation in the system. We couldn't do it as Kodeo because we didn't have the capacity. So that partnership or innovation of working with another civil society organization who specialize in using the AI tools, use AI to ensure that we're able to counter a lot of misinformation happening during the 2024 election.
Thank you. So now I do have to bring a very extensive to a close, but I will start with the other end by asking you to send one final message to Africa about ensuring electoral inclusion in our party. If you were to persuade one final message, what would be starting to?
I think it's civic engagement, and we urge the electoral management bodies to engage stakeholders regularly to pursue open data policies so that there is a trust built into the electoral processes, and also that encourages confidence in the electoral processes as well as leading to high turnout and stability.
Thank you.
Yeah, from my side, voters must, I think, take the control of their democracy and hold political actors accountable.
I would say the public need to be interested in the process of election. It's in our own interest to follow up all the things happening, not leave it to just few people to follow up.
I think we should take interest in the bulging population of young people and make the best use of that population, because it can be an advantage, but can also be a disadvantage if not well used.
I will only add on, mainstreaming the use of technology. We are in a digital era, we are in a global village. Africa should move with the rest of the world and fully digitalize elections to enable citizens to enjoy their sovereign rights as who should govern them.
Has been Darubini ya Uchaguzi. This is, for me, a call to continue this conversation around the continent.
Kutoka milimani, bunga hadi pwani, Elogi nasimama kwa sauti huru, kwa uadilifu na haki, sisi tuko imara, Kenya mpya, kwa matumaini ya dhati. Kutoka kaskazini, kusini, mashariki na magharibi, tunajivunia Kenya nchi ya matumaini. Kwa uadilifu na amani, sisi tunaimba kwa kusema Elogi for credible, peaceful, free and fair elections. Tunatoka kwa jamii, vikundi vya kidini na mashinani, sauti za wanyonge na sauti za wenye nguvu, hakuna aliyeachwa, sote ni sawa. Elogi ni mwangaza wa mabadiliko ya haki. Kutoka kaskazini, kusini, mashariki na magharibi, tunajivunia Kenya nchi ya matumaini. Kwa uadilifu na amani, sisi tunaimba kwa kusema Elogi for credible, peaceful, free and fair elections. Tunatoka kwa jamii, vikundi vya kidini na mashinani, sauti za wanyonge na sauti za wenye nguvu, hakuna aliyeachwa, sote ni sawa. Elogi ni mwangaza wa mabadiliko ya haki. Kutoka kaskazini, kusini, mashariki na magharibi, tunajivunia Kenya nchi ya matumaini. Kwa uadilifu na amani, sisi tunaimba kwa kusema Elogi for credible, peaceful, free and fair elections. Kwa vijana Kura si nambari, bali ni sauti kwa mabadiliko ya kweli na utu. ELOG ni mlinzi wa haki na usawa. Tunajenga mustakabali